Finance Committee to order. And at noon, Sharon, if you'd note who's here for Finance Committee members and others. Approval of the agenda. Move to approval. Thank you. Public participation. Do we have anybody here that wants to address the Finance Committee? I do want to have a conversation about this on the back end, but actually I'll save that for about the public participation in the committee meetings, but we'll save that for another time. Okay, the purpose of the meeting really is to go through the draft audit results. I'll let Angela do the introductions here in just a minute, but we're joined by our audit engagement partner and the senior manager on the engagement, and with Angela walk us through kind of where we are on the FY25 audit. So, Angela, it's all yours.
If you have a lot of notes, there's a lot of detail here, and I don't keep any point. Is what we found out through this particular audit process to close out FY25 was there wasn't inappropriate spending or operational failure, and I want to make that very clear because there were some substantial changes. The strategic alignment that we've been going for is functioning as we anticipated. This was about transactions between Bartlett Regional Hospital and CBJ. And it was a timing issue for the most part, a little bit of cleanup. So historically, CBJ has handled benefits, debt, investments, interest, and cash. And then Bartlett was recording just hospital operations. The reconciliation is not keeping pace with the complexity and the amount of transactions that were occurring. So that was one of the drivers of the changes that occurred. So what we've changed is we've implemented NetSuite, and we've moved a lot of that accounting to hospital level accounting. Also built up a team to support that. We've established formal monthly interfund reconciliations that are a year to date, not a monthly, so we're not missing things because CBJ doesn't close their books monthly the way we close ours. We've defined those cash ownership and cash controls, so we have better reconciliations and accounting for those. And we have audited all of our construction in progress, which has historically been an issue where items that were sitting in progress were not closed out because CBJ has a different way of closing out construction projects, fixed assets than what we do. They are under different regulations. So we have addressed that, and we refiled fiscal year for Wildflower Fork Hospital cost reports to support higher reimbursement at Wildflower Fork. It's important because all of these things drove those major adjustments. So what the audit adjustments mean? One of the larger audit adjustments is related to retirement and pension. And that is 3.7 million. And that is not an operational adjustment. That is a accounting and recording adjustment under gas fee. So that doesn't reflect on what the hospital operations produced today. There was 2 million in depreciation that is related to closing out those construction projects in process and making sure fixed assets were capitalized and recognized timely. I tell you, of that 2 million, 600,000 related to fiscal year 24 prior. So that was a timeliness in reporting issue. 544,000 of that was benefits. So remember, we talked about the wellness benefit that CBJ identified that Bartlett was not compensating them for. That was from fiscal year 24 and prior. So that is also a prior year issue. And then we had the cost report corrections of 431,000. That was us changing cost reports, updating Wildflower Fork and Bartlett to support higher reimbursement. adds blah, blah. So that altogether took us from a pre-audit net income of 8.3 million to a post-audit net income at the draft level of 3 million, 5.3 million. But if we break that down, 1.1 million was prior year. So that's between the wellness benefits of 544 and the depreciation from prior years of 600,000. It's 1.1 million that were prior issues that were caught up and recognized. And then 3.7 of that was PERS retirement events that are not an operational issue. So we're looking at 4.8 million of that adjustment was not related to fiscal year 25 operation. So that is a huge portion of that adjustment. So the 8.3 to 5 or 8.3 to 3 million is 5.3 million. And PERS and the 1.1 is. So we're really talking about operationally changing what was represented by about 600,000. I know it looks like a humongous drop, but there were a lot of mitigating circumstances around that. And what we really did was remove that legacy fog. So Max and Deb have both talked about it in previous sessions that, they've been pushing for this. Joe started this a long time ago. It's been an evolution of getting to this point. This is just the culmination of all that being realized. And any questions?
Questions from the committee or board members? For purposes of the record, I just want to, because there are some pretty significant adjustments here. The first item that you spoke to was the PERS adjustment, which relates to booking our outstanding liabilities for the pension obligations. And that's information that flows in from the state, is that correct?
Yes.
And you don't get that information until late in the year or even potentially after the end of the fiscal year, correct? So even in the best of circumstances, setting all these other issues aside, you wouldn't have known about the $3.7 million PERS adjustment until the end of the fiscal year at best anyway. Is that a fair statement?
It is after fiscal year end when we receive the letter from the state. It is not foreseeable or knowable until we receive that letter.
Yeah.
And it goes through the process. That work is primarily done by our auditors because it is a complex calculation. So it's not something we would ever record timely within the year report. It's not something we would ever do monthly.
Yeah, you don't have the information to be able to do it. So when we get to the end of 26, the year that we're in, you could have another adjustment that we just don't know about at this point until we get the information from the state. That's what I wanted to focus on. So, okay, so we could expect these kinds of things in the future.
Mr. Chair, we've talked about this before, but I don't remember what in theory, if there was some consistency to it, you could accrue something throughout the year for it, in theory. But I guess my recollection is that there's some significant swings on that. And I think we had at least 1 year that it was in our favor. So it's not, I just wanted to confirm that there's not something that we can say, oh, it averages between 3 and 4 million a year. So we can make an accrual estimate throughout the year or quarterly or whatever the heck. It would not be meaningful in any way, right?
It's an actuarial calculation that's based on a variety of factors. And they, until the actuaries do their thing, you just don't know, but you're right. I mean, there's years that it's a huge credit. You've got this big credit employed.
Would you like me to introduce the auditors of this? Week?
Please.
So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the auditors so that they can speak. And Kevin Smith is our partner with I Bailey. And Martin And Martin, I forget your exact title, but he's been directing our audit, is our day-to-day contact.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and we appreciate, Angela's summary of the adjustments and the discussion that was held. And Martin, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the detail of kind of the audit process and kind of where
Sure.
we're at.
Sure. So if I can jump in first on the first question, though, I have a couple of things to say as well to add to that. Essentially what happens is the state purse report is issued after fiscal year end. So essentially there's probably no way of us knowing what the entries would be for GASB 68 and GASB 75. And in some years they might be positive, in some years they might be negative. More likely than not, they're usually negative. And they can be some significant swings in the entries. And that's all based on the basically on the market and how the market does, right? So those entries that they're very hard to estimate. Essentially, we have no option but to wait for the annual report that PERS issues. With that being said, we started the audit process. We started fieldwork in August, the second week of August 2025. And if I can just mention that Angela started at the end of June 2025, and I think there was a conversion to NetSuite on April 1st. And some of the first issues that we were working on in August was the ending balances in Meditech, which was the old GL system. The March 31st ending balances in Meditech were not the same as the beginning balances in NetSuite on April 1st, 2025. So that was kind of one of the first big fires that Angela and her team were working on as we were working on the audit. And that was probably one of the main reasons, Angela, that the audit took so long. And I would say that we had usually what happens with an audit process is usually when we begin the audit, we have all the items reconciled, and we essentially kind of go, and we usually have audit fieldwork of 1 or 2 weeks. I think in this case, we started the audit and we're essentially kind of building the plane we were flying the plane as we were basically building the plane. I think I'll pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions. And I know that I sent a draft of the financial statements at the end of last week. I was wondering if anybody had any specific questions on the draft. I will just mention that there's a couple of things that are missing from this draft. The MD&A section was not in that draft, and that will be sent out early next week. We're still working on making sure that the TB that we had was the same as the TB that Bartlett has. And now that we know that we have all the same numbers, I'll be working on updating the MD&A. And the other item that was missing is there will be a finding in the financial statement, the material weakness. And it really would be one finding, but it's 2 separate issues. One is on the drafting of the financial statements, and that's a finding that Kevin will probably have on almost every GASB hospital that we work with. And the other one is on the AGAs that we have posted for the fiscal year 2025 audit, that Angela went through those in the beginning of the meeting.
Martin, I just want to roll back.
Okay.
Go back through both causes and material weaknesses, and primarily
Okay.
the first item you talked. Let's go through that again.
Okay, so we basically have a material weakness finding in the financial statements, and the first one is the essentially that the auditors have prepared the financial statements, and that's something that we have on Kevin. We probably have on every GASB hospital client that we work with. And essentially, the only way to get out of that finding is if the accounting team and the finance team prepare the financial statements, all the notes, all the financial statements, and we essentially just come in, look at those financial statements. There's no items that are missing, and then we issue the audit report. And quite frankly, that never happens with the hospitals that we work with.
Okay. So is that something that you do when you're doing a yellow book audit? Is that material weakness associated with the yellow book requirements, or is that in general for any auditing standards audit you do?
That's generally with the yellow book standards.
Yellow book standards. Okay. Okay. And then the second one?
The second one is basically mostly based on the journal entries that we posted. As Angela mentioned, there were some significant entries that were posted during the audit. We're not basing that on the GASB 68 entries, right? Those entries that none of us can post before the PERS report is issued. But some of the material adjusting journal entries that were identified during the audit, the most material one was on CIP. And that entry, Angela, I believe, was approximately 12 million. The impact on income of that entry was approximately 1.2 million.
And one comment that I'll add to related to, the management comments or findings that we have, and any time that we have adjustments, especially, material adjustments that we've had, as far as the audit process, then that also, causes a material weakness in financial statement preparation, as Martin was talking about. So there are, rare occasions when financial statements are prepared by the auditors, but there's no changes at all that we can demonstrate that management does have the ability, but they have just chose not to prepare the financial statement. In those cases, sometimes we can kind of waive that or get out of that financial statement preparation comment. But when there's adjustments, and especially material adjustments, then they just kind of go hand in hand. And that's why, as far as the comments will, issue those, but the material adjustments have really, caused a lot of this.
Thank you. Any other questions? So, Martin or Kevin, if one of you could just kind of give us a state of where we are. We can all kind of follow through the yellow lines here, and you gave us an explanation that some of this is still in process. Could you, maybe you and or Angela, give us kind of a timeline to when we're going to get the final report?
Okay, I can probably take that question. So my estimation is that I'll have an updated draft of the financial statements that will include the MD&A and the finding early next week. I think that will be available by the end of Monday. So basically, that should be the final draft of the financial statements. There is one big question that we have to our National Insurance Office that we don't have a response yet on, and that really has to do with the journal entry that we posted to CIP and capital assets. And basically, what is happening with that journal entry is the net income impact is not material. The net income impact is approximately 1.2 million in the current year, of which approximately 600,000 relates to fiscal year 24 and prior. So basically, but the total journal entry is over $10 million. And so the question that we have to the National Insurance Office is the material journal entries impacts capital assets only, impacts CIP and capital assets. So essentially, if you look at line by line item on the balance sheet, it does impact a subtotal on the balance sheet, right? And so we don't know if that will cause that to be a prior period entry, or if we could just have this as a current period entry. So that is one of the big questions that we still currently have, and we hope to have an answer from our National Insurance Office early next week. The other question that we have is the equity in Central Treasury with CBJ, where there's approximately $32 million of assets on the books. I've looked at some of the statements that we have from CBJ as of June 2025, and I was trying to determine if any of that 32 million of cash that is held by CBJ but belongs to Bartlett, if any of that is assets that are measured at fair value. Are any of them stock or money market funds and so on and so forth? Because if there's a material, if there's basically assets that are quote unquote not cash, then that would change the presentation on the balance sheet as well. And so that is the next item that I'm working on as well. I looked at the prior period financial statements for Bartlett, and I didn't see a disclosure on fair market value, and I didn't see anything listed as investments on those financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. So I believe that will not be the case. And we also looked at the one of the statements that we had as of June, and that was on the sweep account, and it looked like 100% of the assets that CBJ was holding were cash assets. But those are the items that potentially could impact changes to the draft financial statement.
So if you could talk to the timing on both of those, the national
Okay.
office issue around the capital assets and then also
Okay.
the equity and central treasury issue.
I think both of those would be resolved. So I'll have an updated draft that would include the MD&A and the finding on Monday, and then the other issues would be resolved later that week. So by the end of the week, we'll know for sure if we need to add anything more material to the draft financial statements by the end of next week or by the end of the month.
And so on the capital asset issue, it's going to be basically doing the prior period on those. Is that what we're talking about here?
That is the worst case scenario, and I hope that we'll be able to get out of this issue. But yes, that may be the worst case scenario. And I think a potential road of hopefully getting out of that being the case is that really the material part of the entry that impacted capital assets, it really didn't impact capital assets in total, right? It did impact CIP and capital assets. However, in total, it made no change to capital assets.
Yeah,
And so I'm hoping that our National Assurance Office will be on board with that.
Yeah, and then as far as, the kind of the rest of the process, once we get that done, I've been kind of reviewing, a lot of the documentation in our binder. And then we have a second partner who has to look at, it in its totality after, Martin and I have completed everything. And so we have a little bit of time to go to get through that whole process to, be able to issue a final financial statement.
Yeah, I got you. The only thing I saw so far in the financial statements, and Angela, I'm sorry, Sharon, if you could go to page 10 of the packet, is on employee benefits. But when you look at the change in those numbers, year over year, the percentage of employee benefits to total salaries and wages is, of course, much higher because of the large debit that's in this year. And actually I went back and looked and we had a credit in the prior year. And in the past, we've broken that out. Bartlett has broken out the components of employee benefits between the, if you'll, the actuarial based adjustments that have to do with the net pension liability and then all other employee benefits, right? Which would be the 22% payment plus for retirement plus health insurance and so forth. And so if we don't need the answer now, but it's just something I asked Angela and I'd like you guys to take a look at is splitting that employee benefit so that we can see better the impact that the PERS related accrual, the 6875 liabilities are having on our bottom line.
Okay, I can easily do that. It's a very, very easy fix on the financial statement. So
I just
I will
want to make sure you're good with it. It is an easy fix. I just want to make sure you're okay with it. Since it was back to one line, I thought maybe not. So, but anyway.
Yes, that's something that we can break out for you.
All I had. Anybody else? Angela, anything else? That was a quick and easy meeting. We'll go on to, Martin and Kevin, you guys can go. Thank you very much for your time. I know you guys have put in a ton of work. We really appreciate it. As we said, and when Devin and I had the opportunity to meet with the auditors with Angela and Joe here a couple of times actually, and they've done a lot of work that we had been hoping for some period of years to get us kind of squared away here. And between their work and Angela and her team, I'm feeling really good about the direction we're pointed. So I appreciate very much the time and energy you guys put into this.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so moving on then, committee comments and questions, anything? One question that came up that was based on some comments that were made at another Bartlett Enterprise Fund board meeting is the a public participation requirement for committees. And the comment was made by the city attorney that at committee meetings, we don't need to take public participation. And, which I thought was interesting. It was kind of a new thing.
That's what it said to me.
Yeah. I thought I'd bring it up during the meeting and just, maybe that's something you could just circle back on us, Joe. And I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And if we have the option to take public participation, if there is any, it's very rare. I want to. I just don't want us to be kind of doing something that maybe we shouldn't do. If they don't take public participation at CDJ assembly level committee meetings, apparently.
Was the advice from the attorney that we shouldn't, or just that we don't have to?
That's the question that I had. It was a specific discussion point around some public participation that was given at the airport, and I was unclear about whether it's
Oh, I see, it came up there.
yeah, it's whether we should or can't, exactly the point you're bringing up out. I just want to make sure we're on the right.
And the issue is not that the public can't observe,
Yeah.
can,
Right.
they just can't.
Well,
Whether or not they can participate.
if we can, we should. I think we should just leave it like it is. I just want to make sure that we don't find out down the road that we shouldn't have been doing something,
Yeah, it's a time in the past, in a statewide regulatory meeting, I asked some questions of some people, experts that were there. And that ended up causing the regulation to have to go back and go through a bunch of stuff. The session, it was a veterinary regulation, and I asked, there were some experts on the line who was observing the meeting, and I asked them some questions. And the state attorney general's office said that we had taken improper public comments during
Interesting.
formation of that regulation.
We do. Yeah. Okay. So it's probably makes sense then for us to cross that bridge, just to make sure we're on firm ground then here. So thanks for following up on that. That's all I had. Anybody else? We're adjourned.
Forward to the final.
Okay.
I look forward to the final.
Yeah.
I guess one question, my question